then let's take a look at the next place. And okay, we're done. I took my photograph. Let's go to the next place. Did you really see? So when someone asks you, like, can you really visualize? And you're like, oh yeah, sure, of course. Well, are you sure? So in your mind, if you try to visualize something like this. So everyone have an image of the Empire State Building in their mind? Yeah. Everyone? Yeah. Right? You actually see it? So imagine, you know, you're seeing the whole thing in elevation, right? And there's like the sun is out and it's basically behind you, and you know, there are clouds in the sky, and the sun is hitting that elevation, and there are even clouds like shadows being cast on that facade, right? So now imagine you slice the whole thing down the center. Can you imagine that?
Mm-hmm.
You can. What about you?
Yeah.
And you see it now. Now pull it apart.
All the floors.
Yeah. Now we'll slice it in half, and then pull it away from each other, and give it, let's say, two widths of those thicknesses. So after you cut it in half and you have like equal ends, right? Imagine two of those in the middle, right? So you see that now? And now light is coming through there, right? And you can actually see the sky behind that.
Right.
And the clouds moving through, and so on. And so, up until then, some people actually say, you know, what do you, like if I ask him, like, what do you see? And you said you see the floors, you know, what else do you see? I mean, do you really see it?
Well, offices. Well, it would depend on whether you've been on different floors or not. But you get like a vague, like you'd assume there's offices, you'd assume that there's
offices and chairs.
So, but you can actually see the building, the stone, it's like, you know, the material, and then the sunlight hitting that. Can you actually see that?
It's difficult.
No? So how much can you guys see? Like height, what do you see when you think?
Still seeing the edge.
I watch the view the house, and I imagine something.
Okay, so whoever was really listening to me.
Alright, so you're standing in front of the building and it opens up like this.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm standing in front of the building, I can't see directly what's in it because it's split down the middle.
Right.
So
split down from the antenna, down the middle, all the way down to the ground.
So all I'm seeing is, I'm seeing the split line of where everything happened. I'm seeing if it's split in between like beams or windows or whatever. That's all I'm seeing. If
Right.
it's split all the way down.
And if we did like this, let's say, ridiculous game, for example, imagine a 100-foot hot dog,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that hot dog is basically that thickness of that Empire State Building, that space that we gave it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it has a little bit of a curve, and you can see the actual glossiness of the
Right.
hot dog, and it's basically wedged right between those two pieces. Okay? Can you see that?
All right.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
You can see that in your mind? And
Mhm.
maybe the sun is hitting and it has a kind of like a glossiness, maybe casting some shadows, right?
Mhm.
And then imagine, and the light can, you know, some of it is kind of dark in there where it's being wedged and so on, is tube, right? This red kind of tube. And then imagine a dispenser of ketchup above. And it's being squeezed, and ketchup is running down this red glistening hot dog all the way down to the bottom, right? And then you stop there, and then you get mustard, and you do the same thing from above, and it's basically comes all the way down to the ground, and then it fills up to the pedestal. It's all mustard. Even the streets, Fifth Avenue, all those streets are filled with mustard. You see that in your head? You see that? Yellow and the red, and then the gray of the stone of the Empire State Building. You see all that?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the exercise that I kind of suggest, the idea of visualization. When you read a book, do you actually visualize what you read, or is it just you're just reading? Now that you have all this idea, these you know, imagery in your mind, right? You see it. It's an actual space. So now imagine that book that you're reading that passage that you're reading, do you actually visualize what you're reading? Or is it just text that you just take in and it doesn't really go anywhere?
Yeah, visualize the way you're reading.
You have to visualize. And pretty much everything, almost everything. If you can't visualize it, then either there's some block within, you know, the reader, or a block within the writer, within the author. So this is kind of like really important, even though it sounds so stupid and so simple. It's like the most important basic, let's say, tool that you need in terms of the idea of visualization. Because there's no way you can talk about an idea, right, if you can't visualize it. And if you have an idea, how do you visualize it into an actual architectural space, right? So you go into your other design, you'll go into your other design studios, and someone will propose, here's a project, you know, and then an idea pops into your head, but that idea has to like be supported by visual material. So just like this hot dog in the Empire State, which is a completely, you know, nonsense, but it becomes a concept, becomes an idea. I basically took out the Empire State Building, made it into hot dog buns. So it changes scale, it changes, and it changes use and function and all those things. It's a stupid, simple example, but it's a visual example to test, like, how well do you connect your words with your imagery. So it's not just, I made this house to this, or I made this house to that. Is it really to that? Is there something that you can really connect in terms of the imagery? And then when someone says, do you have an idea? It's not enough to say I have something on my mind. Anyone can have something on their mind. Do you not have an idea? It means, is there something new that you can bring that's something that you created on your own? Not something that you either found or you woke up with. Like what you had for lunch, that's not an idea. What you had for dinner is not an idea. What's on your mind, if you're upset and so on, is not an idea. An idea is an actual something that's constructed as a statement, as a thought. And this goes back, I just want to bring up some of the things that we keep talking about in terms of even the projects we've looked at recently. But your project with Descartes is a very good example of how to start from an idea and then how do you connect the visual imagery. So depending on how well you could do that visualizing, your project can turn out really great, or okay, or really fantastic. So that's the test, really, from here on. If you have a great idea, you can have incredible imagery that supports it. If the idea is weak, then chances are the imagery will be limited. See, it will only get so far. If you have a strong idea, then there are very few limits. So that's something that I just want you guys to kind of remember when you're moving on, even to the project that you're about to do now. The analysis of the house or the structures that you're choosing is just one step. So what you decide to do with that is something else. And it's not just strictly related to geometry. Geometry is pure and it's great and it's everywhere, but without the mind, it's limited again. Limited because it doesn't have a driver. So you know, this is kind of like this triangle that I'm making. So these work, the way these things work, they're just kind of diagramming. It's like a way of diagramming. I could have diagrammed it like 1 to 2 to 3, like that. But triangles have a way of basically, as a geometrical element, it becomes kind of a strong thing. It has a centroid, it has vertices, it has, you know, specific points, it has angles, and so on. So the idea of this triangle is that when you have an idea, when you have something in the mind, it has to go through an intermediate like state or a stage or a step before it can get to design. You see? And that's something that you guys have to kind of really think about. It's not apple, apple. It's not oranges to oranges. You don't just go directly from, here's my idea, and here it's built. It has to go through some transformation. And the transformation is not 1 + 1 = 2. There's something else going on there, you see? And sometimes you may come to this first, and if you do, you're at a disadvantage. Because when you come to this one first, it means that, number one, we don't know where it came from. It could have come from anywhere. It's almost random. And since it's random and arbitrary, it means that, one, it could be good, bad, ugly, great, fantastic. You'll never know. It's kind of like potluck, hit or miss, Russian roulette, whatever you want to call it. It's all of those things. Because you'll never be certain what it is. And then you'll be looking to find out, what is it? What did I do here? And again, you're at a disadvantage. The mind, starting at the mind is the best way. So it means basically getting into the verbal, and that's the toughest for you guys. And I know it was for me also, but for many students, I always find that that's the toughest because it's the weakest link. It's the thing that no one ever helped us develop. How many of you guys went into literature, like took literature courses and things like that? Okay. And you know what? Maybe you can actually associate your work and see how it influenced. The fact that you did that actually influenced your work a little bit more, because it means your ideas become more developed. You see? So you have now a bigger role, which is, okay, I've seen the power of literature, I've seen the power of the verbal kind of like language. Now, how can I take advantage of that so that I can further the design? You see? Because in the end, you guys are not writers, although that's one big aspect of what architecture should be. The ancient Greeks, for example, the agora. The agora was a space. Anyone knows what it is?
Yeah.
We used to study all different kind of philosophy, science, and all different studies that they have.
Yeah, so it was really the marketplace.
The marketplace.
And so their attitude was, anything that you come up with, you came up with the night before, you invented it, you bring it in there and we have to see it. That was like the, let's say, the unspoken rule. Everyone knew that was the case. You were a mathematician, you just came up with a great equation last night, you bring it to the Agora the next day, and you have to discuss it with everybody. You invented something, you invented some kind of machine, you gotta bring it here and we gotta look at it. And this was kind of like their way of also connecting with the masses, things that sometimes they're not so privy to. Unfortunately, we've lost this aspect. So today, when scientists have figured out like the beginning of the universe, they're tracking it down and they're finding the steps right before or the Big Bang, or right after the Big Bang. Do you think the masses are aware of this, or they've studied this, or they've been told about this, or no, not really. So there's a lack of this communication of kind of directly bringing this information to all of us. Since that's the case, then we have to be better at detecting and going back and retrieving some of this information. So in terms of this idea of the agora, you have to have that in mind, that you are not the only one who's going to critique it. Others will critique it as well. And we are not the measure of our own work in this century. You're not really designing for this century, for this decade, and for today. Actually, your work is more going to be for the future of the ones to come, because they will actually inhabit your spaces and live within your spaces. The people of today, it's almost like you need to step back and take a look at what we've done in order to be able to understand what it is we did. It can't be right now, because right now it's still happening, you see? So now we're studying Corbu and Franco. During Franco Lloyd Wright's time and Corbu's time, not so much. Scarpa only now they started looking at. For so many years, the man has been kind of like, distanced and concealed. And even today, he's such a small character in the history of architecture. You have to go and search for his work. But now they're starting to print more stuff on him, more people, if you look online, you'll see more photographs, people visiting his architecture and so on. So we have to accept that there's this world of kind of like blindness. Duchamp talked about it, called it 30 years of blindness, which is after the artist's death, wait 30 years before they actually discover fully what he was up to. Because for some reason, it's too close to the moment where it happened for them to actually, you know, and we're not talking about the mainstream artists that are already out there and they're well known and everyone's writing magazine articles about them. We're talking about the quiet ones, the ones that we don't know so much about. They're there. We don't really know much about them. Maybe we call them the underground artists. But the funny thing is, a lot of the ones that we know now, they were the underground artists in their time. Like Brancusi, who no one wanted to support. Duchamp actually had to support. And I think one of his first projects was window designs in Macy's. So if you think about how do you start as an artist, there's no clear way. You can maybe have a better chance of doing a window at Macy's the department store and getting noticed. You see, it's not always like we're gonna be great. I do a great project and everyone's gonna write about it and everyone's gonna care about it. You have to kind of be at the right place at the right time. And then in terms of, so this is a process that goes like this. So from the mind, it goes through an intermediate stage, a space in between. And that space in between is what gets us to this design space that we're talking about, actually building something. This center of this idea, what comes out of this triangle is creating things and resonating and inventing. So these three words, to create, to resonate, to invent, are basically three separate, let's say, three separate actions of designing. Because they're different. How are they different? These three. How are they different?
Create, resonate, and invent. Creation is a process, resonate is the impact it has, and then invention is the end result.
To create means to bring forth out of yourself, right? And to resonate means to like, give me an example of something that resonates.
Like when art speaks to you.
Okay, but that's like the way the art critic uses the word. But if you looked at the definition of resonance or resonation, where does it normally used in?
Music.
Used in music and sound. And what does it actually mean? Like
It radiates.
the scientific. It resonates. It vibrates. It oscillates. It reverberates. It moves. Kind of like ripples of a wave when you throw a pebble in the water, right, in a pool. That's resonation. Resonation is basically something coming forward, coming out, pushing out. So when a work of art resonates, it means that it's pulsing, it's alive, it has an energy in it. You see? If it doesn't resonate, it doesn't have that, and you don't look twice at it. It doesn't hypnotize you. It doesn't have light. So that's very different. You can create, but you can not resonate. So if you create and resonate, then you've done something great. And if you've invented, what's the difference with inventing than just creating?
Yeah.
I created a salad today.
You're not the inventor.
Nothing.
Huh?
I say you not because you created you created the sandwich. You're the inventor. Someone else did it before. So
Inventing is something new.
yeah.
So yeah, so you're doing something new, coming up with something new. So if you can create, and you can create something new, and it resonates, it pulses, then basically you've done something excellent. And that's kind of the test. It becomes our own test. After we've kind of done doing whatever we're doing, our own project, and you put it there and you let it sit there. Does it capture anyone's attention? Does anyone say anything about it? When it just sits there, do people walk by and say, oh, wow, what is that, Or is it just kind of something no one notices? It's just text. Hegel was an interesting character. So everyone knows Hegel, right? Philosopher. So he brought up these three terms, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, which are good to remember for your own. And the reason why I'm bringing all this stuff up, is because I noticed the weakness, like the weak link that I was talking about, that some of you have real amazing strengths when it comes to drawing or modeling or building things or even organizing forms. You have like skill there. There's an ability there. And then where I see the lack, the weakness goes into the concept building. So the concept building is exactly what I'm talking about here. This is less about drawing. This is more about thinking. How do we develop a concept? Where do we start from? It goes back to the hot dog in the Empire State Building. It goes to visualization. You have to visualize. There has to be a trigger going in there. Things that you've seen, things from the external world intersected with something in the internal world of yourself. That's the only way. It can't be given to you from outside. It's not enough. Given to you from outside is like Rhino and all the software and everything else. It's not going to give you an idea. All it's going to be, it'll actually impede you from getting an idea. Because of all the operations and so on, it forces you not to get into this world. Hegel discussed this, this manner, let's say you reach this level of thinking. His attitude was, disassociate yourself from anything going on in the real world. Don't think about anything having to do with your problems and your bills and your money and your food and lunch and dinner and what time is it and all that stuff. Throw that to the side, and now you're thinking. Put all that stuff to the side, all that stuff, put it away, and like detach yourself for that brief time, and what you'll find is you'll be in that world that he's talking about, the zone of the mind. It's not easy to get to. It really isn't, because we're so bombarded by the idea of tasks and chores and duties and step by step, and do this first and do this second, and this time I have to do this, and at that time I have to do that. So it's not easy, but it could be done, and it's the only way to reach it. The only way. There's no other way. If you think there's another way, there's no other way. If you've done it, you didn't even know you were in it. If you've done it and you don't know how to get back into it, you did it without even realizing. It could have been a brief moment of defeat and kind of like quiet. And at that moment of the quiet, something clear happened in your mind. You see? Sometimes it happens. Sometimes it happens. The mind kind of like, it's kind of like the idea of the struggle, or after you've gotten tired trying to think about something, trying to come up with an idea, your mind gives up. But actually the moment it actually gives up is the moment the mind gets an idea. Isn't that kind of interesting? You see what I'm saying? You can't force it to happen, it just happens. But it happens only through this idea of like...
Isn't it like when you meditate?
Yeah,
The same?
it's the same thing.
Like
Yeah.
you put your mind into, you don't think about anything. And when you actually think about something,
It's true, yeah. So the meditation, you know, the reason why I don't say meditation, unfortunately, it's been so associated with the wrong things. You see, it's not religion, it's not yoga class, it's not Buddhism. Yeah,
What is meditation? Like, I was always confused about that.
it's what we're talking about.
Like, you just clear out your mind.
It's clear out your mind.
So,
Detach yourself from the grade and the time you have and the pressures and your parents and I got to eat at 7 and I have to pay my cell phone bill. You separate all that to the side and go into a room that has nothing of those things. No computer, nothing.
no distraction.
No distraction except a piece of paper and a pencil. And actually, the simpler the better. And even your phone, everything has to go. And Hegel talked about this a lot. That basically that's the only way to reach it. It's a space. It's an actual space in your mind that you can't reach unless you've detached, unplugged, whatever you want to call it. The Matrix, the movie, used to talk about this all the time. It's kind of funny that they took something very ancient, very old, this idea that Hegel, these guys talked about it. Thesis means what? You guys, I don't know how many know Greek. We have a Greek guy in here. So we know this means, a thesis is what?
It's the main topic.
It's a topic or statement But if you look at it from another point of view, thesis in Greek means to stand or to sit or to position. It's a position. And actually, this is the perfect word for it. It's a position. A thesis is a position. It's a statement. It's like saying, this is what I'm saying. This is my thesis, right? And a lot of times you'll actually see hypothesis. The word thesis is in there also, right? And this is unproven. This is unproven, but this is a position. So what's the antithesis then? It's almost it's the one that repels or the one that challenges this one. So the antithesis is, let's say, a imbalance or a challenge. And maybe we can even play around with the word imposition. Because position's in there, maybe the imposition meaning challenging the position. What about synthesis?
Combination of
Combination.
Okay, it's a combination, but maybe we can try to understand it in terms of what we're saying, in terms of the idea of the position. So the synthesis is the unity or the bringing together, right? And normally this meant a unity. And when I mean unity, I don't mean symmetry, I mean unity, right? So a synthesis, like the body is a synthesis of components, right? It's an actual grouping or unity of a unified element of different actions and different components that work together. So there's a thesis there, but only through having an antithesis, meaning the only way you can arrive to a synthesis is by having an antithesis. Does this make sense? Do you see what I'm saying here? You have to really kind of get this in your head. So only to arrive at unity, you have to have disunity. You have to have something imbalanced. To arrive to balance or to arrive to some kind of connection means that there is no connection. You see? So these three words are not separate ideas. They're kind of working to all three together. That's the idea. It's like a tertiary kind of process. So if I wanted to maybe relate it back to the worm and the butterfly, right? It's almost like a very clear idea of that process, that transformation, that metamorphosis. When you see the butterfly, do you see the worm? When you see the worm, do you see the butterfly? No, they're like completely unrelated things. One is on the ground, one is like in the sky. How the hell did that happen? So there's some antithesis there. There's a statement first, but then there's a challenge to that statement, and then there's some arrival. So that idea of the three steps is something that almost always in great work, actually I have to say always in great work, in great artwork, great architecture and so on, this exists. These three states, you don't have to talk about them, they don't have to be discussed, you don't have to bring them up every time, but if you look carefully, they're there. There are things that are trying to come together. And only through some debate, dialogue, argument, connection, and whatever, they finally come together. You see? Otherwise, they're just separate, random things. Like Cynthia's idea, she started from one quote. I mean, think about how simple that is. One quote. That's all it needed. One Descartes quote started a trigger for her that no matter how simple it is, it becomes a space. And the space is made up of a few different spaces. And those few different spaces have to work together to make a final statement. And the statement isn't just one statement, it's many statements. It's something that should be then a lesson, kind of, I learned that lesson, and what do I do now, kind of thing, you see? So I could have not said any of this. I could have just let you guys continue doing your thing, and you'll get through this course, and you'll do the house, and you'll do the analysis, and you'll do everything. But what I'm giving you here is kind of like the logic behind how do you visualize, how do you get into the mind, how do you design, where does it come from? You see? For me, this is probably the most important thing you can do. If you can understand this, then you have a shot at it. If you can't get through this, then you're on your own. You're stuck, and pray to God Rhino is working that day. I pray for you guys that a year from now, we still have electricity. Or a few years from now, something doesn't happen and we're not in blackout. We'd be in serious trouble, right? I won't be in serious trouble. I can still draw, I can still build. I don't need Rhino. Actually, most of the time I don't want to be on Rhino, because Rhino actually defeats this process. Because you're thinking about, oh, I got to offset, now I got to trim, or now I got to connect those lines. You're no longer thinking in this world. And again, going back into what we've been saying all along, I've been saying this from the beginning. You have the hertz, right, of the brain waves. So I think it's like 4.3. I think we can look